Hello, my name is Randy Dixon. I'm Artistic Director of Unexpected Productions, and welcome to my live Facebook chat. We're going to be answering questions. I'd like to get to the questions as soon as possible. But the theme for this topic today is talking a little bit about the artistic philosophy that goes behind Unexpected Productions. And so I'll spend a little bit of time talking about it, but feel free to let me know that you're on or that you can hear me and I'm not just talking to myself. Um, anyway, Unexpected Productions, we're very lucky because the aesthetic of the company incorporates a lot of different points of view because we have lots of different shows. So the stuff I'm going to focus on tonight are things I think should be applied cross format, whether it's short form, whether it's long form, whether it's a play that we do, whatever it is. And so a few things to think about in terms of a philosophy and an approach that we take that I like to think makes us different and brings something unique to the stage. So let me jump in. So we do, and most of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the company, but just a brief review. We do about 14 shows, I believe, 6 or 7 different formats a week that alters and changes depending on time of year and whatnot. Of course, right now, we're not really doing much, although we will be launching some live streaming some point very soon in terms of performances, in addition to some more dialogues and Q&As like this. All right, so Unexpected Productions, again, founded in 1983. I became, in fact, let me show you this. I found this. It's kind of, I tested this early, but it was blurry. This is the very first theater sports show. And for some reason, the camera won't, even when I zoom it in, it won't. Anyway, this is the very first theater sports show. This is why we call June 24th, 1983, our birth date. And for those in duos or classes, where is he? There he is. The guy in the white hat, that's Mr. Rich Hawkins. So you can say hi to Rich and tell him you saw him in his first theater sports debut, or I guess the debut of theater sports. Anyway, as I said, our first performance was in 1983. Most of you know the history. If you have further desire to know more, you can ask a question here. We started traveling around to different spaces and different theaters, and we were in different spaces in the same given week. In 1988, I became artistic director, basically because nobody wanted to do it. It was a tough job, and really there was a lot to be done, and the company was great. And then in 91, we moved into the Market Theater, which had been a movie theater. And we've been there on and off ever since. So that's a little bit about the history. I won't go into the history of productions because we've done so many of them. Just in our season shows, that's our 8:30 shows, for instance, we do 5-6 shows a year, and we've been doing that for almost 30 years. So it's a long time, over 30 years actually. But yeah, so what goes into this? I mean, what fed into my philosophy, which I bring as artistic director to the company, and hopefully the company embraces it, which they seem to have. And we have such a talented group of people, both performer-wise and those that teach as well. Just really proud of the company. And so where that aesthetic comes from is in my background. I started improvising when I was very young. I was 15 and had this influx of teachers who, from Del Close to Keith Johnstone to later Paul Sills, David Shepard. And I just realized that all these people were talking about the same thing. So the nice thing I feel about UP's aesthetic and our artistic philosophy is we pull from all these different places based on what the show is, what the aesthetic of the show is. So always starting, I think, show creation myself is I get an idea, but then the second thought, or I don't get an idea, and the first thought is always, what do I want the audience to expect? What do I want the audience to leave our theater thinking about or having experienced? And that might just be to have a good time. But I think one of the aesthetics is knowing what kind of show you're in. So am I in this kind of show, or am I in this kind of show, or I'm in a show that kind of can do both? And I think my preference is a show that can do both. For those students who might be watching, or also ensemble members, or even alums, you've heard me say a million times that my personal uh, audience philosophy is I want variety. I want a bunch of different stuff. I want to laugh. I want to cry. I want to do all of that stuff in a single show. And if it's all the same, it gets kind of old for me after a while. Either way, whether it's something that's dramatic all the time or whether it's something that's funny all the time. So oftentimes, one philosophical approach is how do we open ourselves to the other? So if we're doing a primarily comedic format or style or genre, to me, it's then I have to ask myself, okay, how can I open the gates and let some drama in, or some seriousness, and vice versa. If we're doing something that's somewhat serious, how do we get the humor? And always approaching it from that sort of philosophy. Um, some general things that I can address are a return to intuitive improv, which is a term from Viola Spolin. And I feel like it's been not completely lost, but the groups that do it are not that well known, um, because they're basically coming from uh, a place where they love improv as an art form. A lot of groups are coming from a place where improv is a stepping stone to comedy, or as we know in some of the larger cities, it is a stepping stone to a career in comedy. Uh, but when you get into intuitive improv, what you're trying to do is invite what's happening in the room. You're trying to connect truly, in a purist sense, what Del Close called group mind, which you're connecting with everybody, including the audience. And then that's what creates an event aesthetically that is important that you be there to see it. It's not something that you can um, watch later and it's going to necessarily work. It's not quite the same, but it's sort of like participating in this conversation with me right now. You can ask questions, we can interact, I can respond to you, you can respond to me. When this gets reposted, which I believe it will, the people watching that lose a little something because they can't really interact with what we're doing right now. So trying to create that space in the room and invite spontaneity in is another sort of philosophical approach to improv. So it's not about trusting that it's going to work. It's, as Keith Johnstone says, this idea of learning to fail well. So it's not trusting that it's going to work, but when it doesn't work, it's still entertaining, it's still engaging, it's still interesting to watch. And trusting that you can improvise that way. So this notion of intuitive, of responding to what's in the room, is really important. And I have a quote here, actually from Viola Spolin, that sort of talks a little bit about this, and in our own work. And I think that this is also true for, I like to think, for an unexpected productions improviser. Quote, when you are in a state of reflection, you are including another. When you initiate, you deny yourself. And I really love that quote, because I think it's absolutely true. If I open myself up to whatever's going on in the room, whether it's working or not working, um, I'm experiencing something, I'm gaining something, I'm getting something, especially if I'm looking at fellow players who are people who I love and I trust and have been working with, and we know the show, we know whatever it is we're supposed to be doing. And uh, versus coming in with my bag of ideas and trying to force those into scenes where they don't necessarily work. That's not that does me no good unless I love the applause of the audience, which again we'll get to, in terms of why we're here, which I think is not for the applause of the audience. It's it's we're here to be advocates for the audience, to, again, take what they give us and translate it into a theatrical art form, because they're not necessarily trained to do that. And when you see, I think we've all seen the idea of an audience member recognizing their life story being told, in some sort of artistic way, whether that's improv or, if I pick a strong example, if we do a ballet or an opera or something like that, you watch the audience member's face while it's happening, if you can, if you're off stage or afterwards. And it's just amazing the change that you see in them, because they don't believe that their life is necessarily something that could be theater. And yet that's what we're doing. And that's that idea of that exchange that happens in the room. If I'm busy thinking up ideas, then I'm not in the room to experience whatever it is that dynamic is between the audience and me. So we're advocates for the audience. Our job is to take the audience and guide them through the show. And they need to feel part of the show and feel safe and feel like we're not going to make fun of them. We're not going to make fun of their story. We're not going to do all that stuff. So one of the philosophies and aesthetics that I think UP has is this real trying to break down that fourth wall completely. We do a lot of shows where we're experiencing the audience before the show and definitely experiencing the show afterwards. So I've got some more stuff to go on, but I want to also open this up to questions and spend more time on questions than me blabbering on. So, hi, Anna. And let's see, how do I feel UP and the rest of the improv world is responding to this crisis? Yes. How are we responding? I think we're responding well in providing entertainment and things for people to do, because maybe there's nothing to do at home, which again, there should be stuff to do at home. But that being said, I think, providing online content is an area where improv has been really responsive. Some of it successful, some of it not. But I love the attempts at it. Where we're not really addressing stuff, and this goes back to this idea, and I'll talk a little bit later on, is this notion of using your life on stage, but also using the audience experience on stage. And what I'm not seeing in a lot of the improv, and not that we have to do a whole coronavirus show, because we're all sick of coronavirus, hopefully not sick with coronavirus, but it's sort of like, what is, but we could be doing scenes about what is life in isolation, or what is life when all these things that we're used to get cut out or cut off. And how do we reconnect, and how can we show that in a way through improvisation? Because again, those of you who've been students and ensemble members are sick of me saying this, improv's the only art form where something can happen today and you can put it on stage tonight. And so something can happen in the world today, whether that be me in isolation or the world and what's developing, and we could do things live stream that night or online that night. And I don't see, and granted, I don't see everything, but I haven't seen that a lot in the improv stuff that I've seen. And I get it. Maybe people are trying to avoid it because, as I said earlier, we're all kind of sick of talking about it. But it doesn't have to be about the virus itself. It can be about everything that ripples out from, this quarantine. And I would love to see more of that, because I think that then we're using our experience and we're using our brains. And it's an easy way to connect, I think, with an audience, because they're sitting at home like I am going, what do I do now? Right. So if we play with that a little bit, that would be great. So cool. Well, all right. I'm going to open it up to some more questions. And while they pour in, let me talk about this real life thing. Everything I believe in improv should come from your real life. It doesn't mean the most intimate details of your life. So again, the smallest thing can be taken from your life. So if I'm going to describe a car, I might describe my car because it's easy. I don't have to make anything up, but I'm pulling it from my life. Obviously, life experiences, places we've been, things we like, people we know, people we work with, people at home, our family, all those are right for a number of ways. One is, relationships, characters, um, details, interests, anything that you don't have to make up. You just reach out and grab it, because the more you can use what's in the room, right? So again, improv's not about making anything up. It's about using what's already there, right? So you've got this audience full of life experience. You've got performers who are trained and ready to go and also have life experience. There's already a lot going on before the show even starts. So why not just use that rather than bringing in a bunch of other stuff? The games are there to help us interpret what we're getting from the audience or using from their lives and our lives, but it should still be about those things. And I'm a firm believer myself, so I guess it's a part of my philosophy with UP, is that all monologues, for instance, I believe should be true monologues from your life. Doesn't mean they have to be interesting. Again, doesn't mean they have to be revealing. I just want you to use your life, because again, it's the one time, maybe depending on the format, where an audience gets to interact with you, rather than you as a character or you in a game or you here, but they actually get to see you as a person, right? So cool. Well, let's see what else I got. I made some cheat sheets, and I think part of the UP, and I said this at the very beginning or towards the very beginning, I believe the pieces, whether it's theater sports or some sort of long form or a genre, should have something to say. Improv, as I always say, should be about something. And whether that's, the small, minute details of life, like finding parking spots or whatever, because everyone does that, or if it's some big discovery that someone has made in their life, or some sort of commentary on what's going on, or some sort of commentary on what's happened in the past. All of these things should be about something. And I think it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be this sort of life-altering, event every time you're doing a scene. But I just love that idea of that, because again, I'm not having to make anything up. I can use, what I have to say, what I have to offer as an artist. And I think it's true as a theater. You need to have something to say. I think it's true as a piece, even if it's just what I have to say is I really want the audience to have a great time, then own that. And as an individual performer, and I ask students all the time, I say one big question we keep coming back to that I like them to meditate on for a long time, past the class for sure, is why am I doing this? Right? Why am I investing all this time and energy and money in learning how to do this? If it's just about goofing off, and maybe it is, but if it's that for you, then own that, right? So let's see what we got. Oh, hi, Trixie, how you doing? Okay, this is a long one. We actually all have, okay. To improvise at the moment. We're walking backwards in the future, right? We don't know. We have to find out. We constantly fail. We experiment. We cannot apply what we know and what we already worked on in our art form to this new median situation. Okay, so now, yeah, definitely. We have to find and create a new art form. Yep. Will be a different one, completely different by all means. There is improvisation in jazz music and theater improvisation on stage. They have the same principles, but are different art forms. Okay. They will share the same principles, but will be different. Sorry, I'm skipping through this so I can get to, I am reading it, but online improvisation, right. And technology is transporting art to the audience. Yeah. Zoom is fine as a crutch borrowed from business. Yeah, certainly. So we need IT persons, definitely. I speak from firsthand experience with that on IT people. We need them. But do I really want this? Okay, transferring our work to the virtual world. Do I really want to work on and create new art of improvisation? Sitting alone in a room. Yeah. Okay, so talking a little bit about the first part, I agree. And this is, and I'm sure, we're talking about doing some online improv ourselves, and I'm sure some of it will have a reflection and uh, um, and you know, what I see are people recording the show that they would normally do live on screen, but it doesn't work because it's meant to be live. And so, again, wanting to see more interplay between us and the audience through this giant obstacle, which is the technology. I mean, we're so used to, in our theater spaces to have that face to face interaction, and we can't have that here. So I think, but in relation to that, before I get to the second part of your but, is to me, we can use the skills of improvisation through application to do what improv should be doing, which is another artistic philosophical point from me in hopes to be embraced by UP and is embraced by UP, which is about building community, right? And again, that kind of goes back to the Spolin school of and definitely with David Shepard, trying to build community. And that is the end goal of improv, like for us, I think I'll speak for myself, I guess, but I've heard it expressed by other people in unexpected productions, as well as around the world with the relationships we have. You're building a sense of community, and it feels like family because you've been successful at it, building the community. So part of it's how can we build this online community that actually works? And to me, it's like the improvisers are doing what improvisers do, and the audience just watches that. It's sort of like a TV show where the TV doesn't really care whether you're watching it or not, right? So how do we get more bleed through this screen? Now, do we really want this? Personally, no. Personally, I'm a huge, firm believer in the idea of being in the room and that it happens at one time, that it can't be recreated. And it's a product of everybody in the room. And then when it's over, it's gone. It's not recorded. It's not then reposted. You're not able to go back and see it again. And we've all experienced that feeling sometimes. If you've ever watched a videotape or a tape of, an old improv show, you kind of go, that doesn't quite taste right. Even though you remember it very fondly. And I think that's what happens. It's not in and of the moment. And what's funny about this, I've been thinking about this because it's sort of a problem that maybe you guys have run into as well, is the idea that there are these delays based on the tech, right? So for instance, all of this stuff that I'm doing right now, it's, there's a little pause between what I'm saying and when you're hearing it. And so it's like, it's not in the moment in the room. And is that something we can turn into an advantage, or at least figure a way around that? I don't know. I think maybe after this is all over, because of the onslaught of online stuff, I think this kind of thing will need to be a component to what a lot of groups do. Not that it has to be the main thing, but I can see definitely groups carrying on with more shows. But personally, I'm not that crazy about that unless we're finding new ways to use it. So, and yeah, I see, Bronwyn's on. Trixie, Yuri. Hi, Yuri. So, this brings up the international aspect. So this notion of connections from people around the world, and people who are developing a similar aesthetic. And I spend a lot of time traveling and teaching, but also learning a lot from people like these guys. And that's another way that improv has built the community. And that's a way, going back to Trixie's question, and I don't know if you agree with this, Trixie, but in some ways, that's where technology has helped us in terms of being able to connect regularly. I guess maybe what I'm saying I'm worried about is the show, like drawing an audience. But in terms of how we connect internationally, even through email and through things like this or Zoom or whatever platform you're using, that is that is a way that I think technology has helped us. And maybe it's not, maybe if we all got on a phone call, it would be the same, but I think it would be a little bit different. But that's just off the top of my head. And okay, Jim, let's see. Moving online shows for a while. Yes. And how do we do it? That's a good question. We are in talks and amongst the staff and everybody, and lots of ensemble members poured in ideas. How I see us doing it is we're going to be doing different things. So, for instance, these Q&As, like what I'm doing now, I'll preview a little bit. I'm going to be doing a series of interviews, actually probably some of these international folk, kind of one-on-one that people can watch and ask questions about the art of improv in general. Since if we're going to be online, why not be online around the world with somebody and talk to them, and then allow our audience and their audience and any audience to be exposed to that. In terms of the kinds of shows, again, I'm sure we'll do some stuff that's based on some of our content adapted for this form. I'm not sure we'll do like straight on one camera, just regular show. In my experience, limited experience in watching this stuff online, it doesn't really quite work for me. Might work for other people, but so might do a little bit of that. But what I'm really hoping to do is to make adaptations to things and maybe discover new things that will work only here. And not necessarily be just our show online. I think that's sort of how we'll go about it. I don't know exactly when we're going to be starting shows. We are looking to do online events, various places. I think we're shooting for Wednesdays and Saturdays. We're doing this afternoon time actually as an experimental slot because there are a lot of groups that are doing shows in the evening, and so we don't want to try to compete with a bunch of other improv theaters who are doing shows. So we thought we'd try, and also a chance to grab potentially some international people, which we have. So I don't know yet. There's no set date other than these kinds of things. Or if you go, you can find our improv tips, which are like these 1-minute improv tips. But this is like the second event we've done like this. So it's a long-winded answer to your question. Sid. Hi, Sid. Here, online, or just in general? What do you think? Oh, wait. Well, I'll address both. I think getting one-word examples online, I'll keep this short because I do want to talk about actually being in the room. Getting one word online, I did see a show where that happened, and I felt totally disengaged because, again, there's all this distance. There's a giant machine between me and the performers, and they would get one word and then they would do a scene. And so, okay, I'm watching them do a scene, but I'm going, I could be watching, TV as well. So, so to me, more interaction, not necessarily getting longer stories, but at least more back and forth, even like this, would be, to me, much more interesting to watch and, frankly, to do than just getting one word. There's that debate in the art form in general about, because there are groups that don't even get suggestions. I'm old school, so I believe you should always have interaction with the audience. And I think the more interaction you have with them, the better. The more you can draw from their lives, the more you can get. And again, what I would love to see improv do is adapt to translating or transforming in some cases. So for instance, let's say we get an experience from the audience. I would love to see more groups translating that in, for instance, not reenacting what the audience member gave us, but taking some of it and somehow, so it's still recognizable, but doing something different with it or expanding on it or doing it in a different way. So if you get a very concrete story from an audience member, if you did it using abstraction or using monologues or doing something like that, to me, that's much more engaging. Um, so, and it kind of relates to like our campfire format, where when we're working on the format, the idea is to not reenact the story, because the story from the audience member is always much more interesting than anything we were going to do with it. So the goal is to take elements of the story and try to create a new story, so that if we get 3 audience member stories in the course of the night, you're going to get 6 stories, because you get the audience member stories and then you get our 3 adaptations of them. So I think more application with that would be great. Let's see. Um, right. Okay. Uh, in the before times, I like that, Tim. Someday we'll talk about in the before times. Uh, um, I do feel, well, one, I will say, and I think I speak for several of us at UP, the 2 weekends actually prior, when this was all kind of taking shape and it seemed to be a snowball rolling downhill, I was really surprised by the audience sizes, even though we had, as Tim said, cut them down. I was surprised. I thought people would run and hide, but people wanted to be out and connect. Again, I think not only to entertain themselves because they're bored, but just to connect in community with other people. And stuff I would like what I saw happen was, with fewer people, the performers connected more with the audience in a way that they don't if it's a small house, which is kind of, I think oftentimes maybe a take home from that was, we need to do a little more work on working with small houses, because I think sometimes shows, and our shows sometimes happen this way as well. You approach a show as though, oh, it's a full house and there's the audience, and nothing's different, versus really connecting with the people. There's a lot more dialogue between performers and audience in those shows, and that's something I would love to carry forward. Not that the show needs to be longer, but just finding ways to get that information efficiently, so that you can use it, and again draw more stuff from the audience. I mean, we're creating that special show for them, right? We're lucky, most of us, that we get to do a lot of shows, or we're in shows, say, once a week, or in many cases in UP even more. This might be that one audience member's time to be out and about, whether this is going on or not. So it's a very special night, and one of the things to talk about, again, the audience aesthetic, and a philosophical approach to the audience, is during Christmas Carol. I always say that, families they come every year, and I go, this is their Christmas. This is their big Christmas thing. This is their Nutcracker. This is their Christmas Carol overt act. This is whatever it is, the ballet, and it's, so it's like, wow, I can't just phone it in. I can't just, oh, I'm not into this. Oh, the audience isn't responding. You have to, rise to the occasion and be there for your audience. And I think they appreciate it. I know I appreciate it when I'm in an audience. And again, that's where I draw a lot of my stuff, as a artistic director and as a director, is from my own experience as an audience. When I go see stuff, what am I learning? What do I enjoy? When am I engaged? When am I not engaged? So, for instance, when I was researching this in the initial stages, I did not watch live stream events of improv. I've just recently started kind of binge watching improv live streams. And the reason why I did it was because I knew if I was watching improv, I'd want to sort of critique the improv, or automatically critique the improv one way or the other. Wow, that's really good. Wow, that's really bad. But when I was going to see music stuff and dance stuff, and so all of a sudden I could be an audience member, and I could go, what do I like in this exchange, and what do I not like in this exchange? And so I learned a lot that way. And now finally I feel like, oh, now I can add improv into it. And with the stuff I learned from there, I'm still doing both, but that was a conscious choice on my part. But that idea of that, just that connecting to the audience. I mean, it's a philosophical idea for UP is turning disadvantages into advantages. And for instance, going back to the suggestion thing and engage Sid's question about engaging the audience in more information rather than just getting a single word. I mean, some people go, oh, it's a disadvantage because they bathroom, blah, blah, blah. Well, not if you train your audience right. They'll give you really good stuff if you teach them how to give you really good stuff that they want to see. And it's a disadvantage that becomes an advantage because we're, again, one of very few art forms that can actually go out into an audience and say, hey, what do you want to see? What do you think? Right? And why not? Why not take advantage of that? Use that advantage. I think so. In so many cases, we try to drum any actual, improv spontaneity moves, anything like that, out of improv in the name of, I don't know, safety. So let me move on. Not move on. Let me carry on. I'm just going to keep going here. Bronwyn, community building, great. Thank you. International exchange, good. Inherently, why are we doing it? Inherently, who and for? Again, the audience. And hopefully you're doing it with like-minded people, although I know in every single group, it's not always like-minded people. There are people that disagree with this approach, and they want to get their yucks out. They want to get, whatever the thing is, they want to get their laughs, and not necessarily take the audience on the journey. I think the goal is to try to, if you're putting together a show, whatever the aesthetic of the show is, to try to find as many of those people as possible. Again, I like variety, but I also like variety in performers. So not only in the show, but in performers. So I will sometimes use people kind of fish out of water. Take someone who's, very, let's say joke and gag driven and put them in something a little more serious or thoughtful in a way to try to get them to open up a little bit to that experience, and vice versa. I'll take people who, tend to want to be sort of self-exploratory and then drop them in the middle of some sort of, joke fest show or something like that. So, and let's see, what do we got now? So I have a technical question for Kent real quick. So I'm at Bronwyn's message and I'm at the bottom. So does that mean there are no more questions after this and I can explore on some other things? I'm asking a tech question from someone who knows. So while he's giving me the answer to that, in American improvisation, this idea of the audience being important becomes, that's the origin of it. Again, Viola Spolin wanting to bring together communities, David Shepard through formats like Living Newspaper, where they literally got on stage and read articles from that day's newspaper, and the audience saw scenes on that. And so it was about them in their lives. Now, it doesn't mean it has to be dramatic. I keep coming back to this because I think oftentimes people misread me and think, oh, Randy doesn't like comedy, doesn't like being funny. And it's like, no, but I love humor and I love comedy. But I just see it as, in many groups and in many players, as the end all. And, comedy should be the byproduct of what we're trying to do, not the goal or the aim of what we do. So it's like, we can tell a very serious story, but it can still be funny, An example of that, which I learned one way and then figured out, oh no, it has to be a different way, was a serious scene. So some of you might know this, a serious scene. And when you play it in a show, sometimes they play it where the first laugh, the lights go down. But the way I teach it now or direct it now is I spend a lot of time explaining. Think about your own life. Things are going horrible. Something's going wrong. You just have that moment where you laugh because it's just funny, in what Dell used to call that laugh of recognition, right? You just recognize something, some truth in it, whether, or someone else's story. You recognize the truth. Oh yeah, that's like me. Um, and so when you're doing a serious scene, the first laugh shouldn't be the blackout, right? Because dire times you can have you can still find the funny, and then the example I use, which is all hoity-toity and arty, is I say, I mean, Shakespeare understood this, and if it's good enough for Shakespeare, it's good enough for me, where he's got these tragedies that have these comic moments and vice versa. And so I'll take a page from his book. And uh, the and when we start doing that, what we do, I think, and trying to do it, Unexpected Productions, is, and definitely for myself, is move improv forward as an art form onto itself, rather than, again, a stepping stone or something that you do for a while to put on your resume and then go, do other acting or do, fine, if that's for you. But to me, it's about striving to make the art form better and move it forward and do things with it through applications that we don't um, normally do. So it's not just getting on stage and being funny, but there are lots of other applications that we can have to it. So, whether that's, just short form improvs or something like theater sports, long form improv, something like Herald or other things, genre work, fine. You can do script development. You can do application of improv to existing text. You can do immersive. You can do improvised filmmaking. The list goes on, and we should be exploring and pushing all those things forward rather than just kind of settling on let's be funny and and whatnot. So, like, example I currently have, or is currently on my mind a lot, is working with genre, because I'm a genre purist. I think you really need to understand the genre and how the genre works, and not just allude or comment on the genre, which I see a lot of. And um, and how can we push the execution of the genre forward in a way that the improv becomes at the forefront? Because right now, in a lot of shows, I see the genre is at the forefront, which I can understand it. But again, that's why people are coming, because it's that genre. It's not the improv. You want them to fall in love with improv, right? They already love westerns or you know Moliere, that kind of stuff, right? So, and we do those shows, but the idea, at least the way I try to approach it, is how can I try to push it a little bit more each time? Is there something different that we can do with it? So, you know, developing as an artist, for instance, with genre, something I was talking to, because of all the improv training there are a lot of improvisers that's all they have in terms of being on stage is improv training. And I think another philosophical point I try to make to our ensemble and to students is knowledge. Just get out there and learn stuff. Read the plays, read the books, read the papers, read all that stuff. Because especially we tend to reference pop culture a lot, but we don't tend to reference sort of ordinary life news. And again, it doesn't have to be about whatever that news thing is, but what is life like in this particular situation or in this world or under this influence? And the more you know about it, then the more you can do with it. So, improvising smart, Dell used to say, improvise from the top of your mind, right? And I think that's really, really wise. And so trying to keep up on stuff, and especially stuff that you use in your show. So if something pops up in your show and you have no idea, whether it's a suggestion from an audience member or whatever. I used to do this all the time. I still do it. Somebody says something to me and I don't know what it is or whatever, I'll maybe take a back seat because I don't know what I'm talking about. But if I have to do it, I try to do what I can. And then, the next day I'll start looking it up, because who knows when it's going to come up again in a show. So this idea of constantly upping your game, I think, is part of our philosophy at UP, challenging each other to do stuff. That's why, we have a bunch of classes and we bring in these master teachers and we bring in other people and we try to open it up to our ensemble as much as we can, and to the students in a way of trying to improve skills. So clowning and Kent does storytelling and all these different things that people go, oh, I can learn about storytelling, tell stories. Yes. Or maybe you're going to take those skills and apply them when you're improvising as well. That's sort of the goal. And there are certain shows, like for our Thursday show for a long time, I would do arcs of a season. So I'd plan out the year and it would be like skill building. Well, in this show, they'll learn this skill. This show, they'll learn that skill, this skill, and then we'll put it all together in this show. And so sort of using them as building blocks. So, yeah, let me see if there's anything else here on my list. I think that a big one, and this is more an individual choice than, say, an artistic aesthetic that I can make people do, is the notion of being authentic, and being yourself on stage. And again, it doesn't mean be emotional or that kind of thing, but just being real, I think, and good natured about it. That's a kind of a Johnstone principle about being good natured. Been thinking a lot about that Johnstone principle in the last little bit, because one of the things he says is he loves, like in theater sports, when people are getting low scores or whatever, coming out and embracing it, or they fail and just popping up and, okay, great, blah, and we'll do it again. And he said, and the way he puts it is, or at least the way he's put it, is the audience loves to see people healthy and fit and getting along, because we don't see that in life all that much. So, and so I love that, and I think he's right. But it's also interesting to me, and kind of going way back to one of the earlier questions, the idea of community and how this online thing happens, because it's amazing to me. Zoom, right? I mean, everyone's doing Zoom. So as soon as we can't be connected, everyone's yearning for connection, right? Everyone wants to connect. And this is, this online stuff, again, Facebook, Zoom, whatever it is the way that we're doing it. But one thing I would put out there, and it's kind of counterintuitive, but I think it does play into that knowledge base thing of improving yourself, is, I guess, don't over Zoom, but spend some time maybe learning, reading a book or a style or a genre or a playwright, or see a movie that you haven't seen that comes up, or a director that you haven't seen, and just use that kind of self-improvement time while you're alone, and then go back to your different Zoom meetings and talking about different stuff. Yeah, so what else? Let me look at my cheat sheet again. Sorry, I'm all over the place. Or if there's other questions that people have. There's so much of this that I didn't. Oh, yeah, okay. All right. So, hey, how you doing? How's Denmark? Wow. Okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Cynthia and I were just talking about being there. Hi, Morton. How you doing? That's great. Wow. Good to see you. Cool. So I'm going to start wrapping stuff up, but I mean, there's so many resources, and I feel so lucky in my improv career, and what I'm feeding into, like to think I'm feeding into UP, in hopefully a decent way, is the aesthetic and impulses I learned from the people that I learned with, who are obviously amazing teachers. And as I talk to students all the time. It was like by no design. Those were just the teachers you learned from. And oh, hi, Frank. And wow, we have quite the international community. This is great. Thank you. And oh my gosh, they're popping up from all over the world. But those are the people you learned from, and so I feel incredibly lucky that I fell into improv when I did, which was younger than I probably should have, but I did, and then I got to learn this stuff. And I feel like even now I'm just starting. Certain things are just starting to click, that they were like seeds planted, and now the idea is to take advantage of people like myself, the books that are written. There's lots of stuff from all those guys, Johnstone's, Augusto Boal, Viola Spolin, right? Keith Johnstone, all those guys. I would say, seek them out. And yeah, and so many great people I haven't seen in a long time. I hope to connect with you in a separate conversation or email exchange. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. One thing is, you can, and maybe you can post them here, or post them to the Facebook page, or if you have my email, you can send it to me, or Kent Whipple, Kent at unexpectedproductions.org, of future Q&As that you're interested in. So we have a list of certain topics that we're putting up, and maybe that's good enough for you, but maybe there's something specific that you have that we can find someone, whether it's me, another company member, or something, Jill Ferris, our education director, to address and have a very specific conversation. Again, things to look forward to are more of these. Going to be doing some extra credit kind of stuff where I will be, or someone will be interviewing someone else. Again, some of the people who are here are on that list. And then, of course, obviously, show content and different kinds of show content that we'll be trying to do. Look for the improv tips. We're essentially just trying to engage people and give people moving forward something that when all this is over, we can come back and we will have all hopefully picked up and learned something, not coronavirus, but improv stuff. So anyway, I appreciate you guys taking the time to do this, and it's been a lot of fun. This is my first time doing this, so I was like, so thank you guys, and I will toast you with a glass of water, and stay well and be healthy. See you later. Okay.